to Dudley Creek flood remediation update. Carleen, you've got some changes that you want to make.
Yes, I'd just like to take out 8.3. My proposal was actually to talk to Sarah, my equivalent over there, and I think that we could deal with it that way, if not come back to council at that stage. My proposal is to take out 8.3. Simply, I think that we can have a discussion with Sarah around this, and should that not be successful, then come back to council. But I'm pretty sure we can work it out ourselves.
If I may, are you suggesting that it's an informally request rather than formally?
Through officials. We'll work through officials.
We are through the red zone with officials in various ways that we can implement not only this little piece of work when we decide exactly what this piece of work is going to involve, but other bits and pieces. It's just if we go through that actually formally locks in a solution, and it may not be the easiest and the right solution. So what we're saying is they recognise we've got a request and they recognise both of them, and so we will have to resolve it by the time we come back with a final solution. But we will. We're working on a variety of different solutions.
So it's correct, I think in the report it says that the funding required for Beaker is contained within the original 48 million for the cost of this option. Yeah.
What you've funded in the LTP is a series of investigationary works and also physical works, and so it's within your LTP or within the budgets that we've got already, and some of that will be carried forward into the final, and then we've got both investigations and physical works in the next 3 years for the drainage program. Right. As we go into final design.
And the discussions with Sarah about the section 53 would apply to both options, either options?
They're slightly different. They're different, and so the solutions might be different in the different cases. And
but we still need their consent.
We need their approval to put any infrastructure into the red zone.
Yeah,
and
that's
either
covered
of the
by
options.
their act. Whether it's the Banks Ave or the other one.
My understanding is that because the Banks option does take widening of the creek. Potentially, and look, we'll come back with a detailed report. One option might be a little bit easier than another option, but we'll come back as part of the pros and the cons of the various options when this work's been completed.
And is there any chance that it could be completed earlier than July?
My understanding from our consultants is they're working pretty hard to try, and we've got our foot on there, driving them very fast to get that. So no, I would say, but I don't actually think that there's a bit of work to be done around red zone as well. So I would not raise your expectations that it'll come back any earlier.
And we still have to go through the consultation process. So we have to have both options worked up to a very high level so that we can consult formally. And that's required to meet any requirements that Sarah will have that we've taken into good detail.
Not already consulted on one option?
So
going to redo that, or?
Yes. So this the agreement at the December meeting was that there would be further engagement and consultation on both options with the community, including Banks Avenue residents. So we will go through a short formal period of consultation to allow that process to complete. And that's part of the process that would be required to meet the SERA requirements as well.
Yanni, sorry.
The resolution should say retrospectively approved, and it just seems like a huge amount of money. What confidence can we have? I mean, why is it costing so much to just get consultants to do this work? How much, is it just the time involved? Is it the expertise? It just seems extraordinary amount of money.
They're going to have to do a reasonable detailed design on two options, obviously, but when you think design costs of 10% are not unusual, it's actually within the ballpark of the work that has been specified. It has been out for competitive tender, and so there were, help me here, multiple tenders that came in.
Yes, one of the reasons for putting this up, because at the December meeting, there was approval given under delegate authority to award the consultancy contract. The reason we're bringing it back is to tidy up, because we've extended the scope of that slightly to include construction supervision. So this gives us certainty of all the fee element within the design consultancy services, including construction supervision.
And do we not have the existing capability within our own organisation?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Do we not have the existing capability within our own organisation? I just wonder whether if we spent $5 million on having the appropriate technical staff within our own organisation, whether that's better value. Like, have we been through that exercise?
Within my area, we haven't tooled up to do. We're principally doing, we've got project managers who are managing the various programs and projects. Principally, most of the works, because it's a short, intensive, is outsourced. There are some consultants that we've employed almost full time, but we've also got some good rates on there. There are a couple that we think if we're going to have a job for them for more than 2 to 3 years, we are actually either employing them or we are doing. So we're looking at the balance of what's the most cost effective for how much of that work and how much is that specialised expertise required. So.
Yeah, mine sort of follows along those sort of lines, just looking at the huge amount of consultancy costs and actually the overall project costs of 48 million proposed. And will this work be holistic enough to take into account that if there is a massive rainfall, that the down part of a catchment doesn't become flooded from the works we do up the catchment? So I just don't want to see us go down the track, investing all this money and we flood somewhere else. And I suppose, and some of that's actually, I don't know, will this work encompass that?
Yes, so obviously that's you're voicing a concern that the public may reasonably have. So that's why we're employing specialist consultants. The modelling work has been done to give that reassurance that this is a well-balanced, well-designed proposal that will meet those objectives.
Just I suppose following on from that, and I suppose the removal of the 8.3 is around the future of that red zone part, which we know we're going to have to obviously put some stop banks in somewhere to help mitigate issues with flooding and not knowing what we can actually do in there and the work we're going to be doing. I just want to make sure there is actually a joined up process through the whole thing. I suppose that's really the nub of the question.
What we've done is we've given Sarah an indicative run of where we're wanting to put our stop banks and our infrastructure in the red zone, and that will form part of the consultation that they'll go out with the community, and it will be all integrated approach. I think if you remember last time we brought it up, I think there was a discussion about there's some works that weren't going to be affected by the bottom end of the works, and you suggested why don't we proceed with those, and John Mackey at the time said, well, if you proceeded with those, it's actually going to make the flooding issue in that same catchment further. So that's why we haven't done those kind of work, just for exactly the reason that you've raised.
Quickly. If we fast track ahead and say, let's say option 2 was deemed to be appropriate, the one going through the red zone, would that mean that we would basically be redirecting the Dudley and the Banks Ave one would be dry, or would we just use that red zone one in a flood?
That's the second option. So the bypass would be dry the majority of the time, other than for testing. Right. It would just be in a storm event that would become a secondary overspill.
That's good. And then we also have an option of whether it would be piped or open.
Yes. So we've what we have been doing is we've been having some very detailed conversations with the affected landowners. The indications are at this stage that a piped option or a micro-tunnelled option would be strongly favoured to an open channel option. And so that is something that we've been talking to them about.
Right, are they also aware that it would probably be dry most of the time?
Yes.
Because an open one is that operationally better for us?
In some respects, an open channel obviously takes up more land space. It's more disruptive to the land that it passes through. The Marion College have still to decide or the church is still to decide what to do with that site, and so they want to keep their options open. Similarly with the park, an open channel would be more disruptive to the facilities on the site, the cricket, etc., or start to impact upon trees more. So it's a bit of a balance. So one of the things that the consultants are doing are, investigating those options in more detail to ensure that, we have a workable proposal to put back to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. My clear recollection of the December meeting, following on the arborist's report of the Banks Avenue area, which would indicate the decimation of half of the trees in that area, was that the staff were going to go away to look for other options. We're now presented with this report, which indicates, look, here's an option over going through red zone land, but what comes through in this report today is an interpretation that, which I see, that is actually non-committal. It doesn't actually indicate that it's a future solution for Banks Ave. It looks like it could be one way or the other. Is that
That's what you instructed us. We gave you 4 options, and there was a variation on the 4 options, and we took option 1, which was the original one, and option 2, which takes you down the back, and there's a slightly different cost. And those are the 2 options that you asked us to go on, and those are the 2 that the consultant's designing up. And we're going. The issue with the second option was we hadn't talked to people directly affected, and there may have been other submissions. So you've asked us to lift the 2 of them and then go compare, but also to identify the trees that are affected. And I think while there are trees affected, you've got to recognise that when we do any project, we also re-landscape, and part of that re-landscape would be replanting of trees. And so it's actually looking up those 2 options and what are the 2 options, what are the pros and the cons, both from an effectiveness point of view, from a cost point of view. So that's really what this work's going to do. But we've eliminated, help me here, I think there were another 2 options or maybe another 3 options. They got eliminated at that last meeting, so we're only really comparing 2 options.
Okay,
So,
I guess I just wanted to reinforce the collective voice of the 4 ward councillors representing that combined area is quite strong, that this would decimate that area. So I just wanted to reinforce
Yes.
that.
One of the things that we are looking to do is to ensure that the 2 options put forward are apples with apples, that they're both worked up to the same level of detail. There was some criticism last time that the alternative bypass was not worked up to that detail, and Banks Avenue needed further work to lift the detail on that too. So what we'll have is we'll have 2 options worked up to an equal level that we can have a fair comparison on. And again, that's something which Sarah have indicated is going to be really important in determining the consent, because it's important that the right decision is made on the best option.
There'll be enormous pushback if we go through Banks Ave. Just let you know.
Any public work should not decimate an area. Basically, we would go through and we would reinsert, but we've got to look at the comparisons of the 2, and we've got to look at the costs, and you've got to look at the effectiveness of them, and that's what we are going to bring back to you in July.
So
in July, have I got that right?
so when you're evaluating option 1, which the Banks Avenue one, are you coming up with an option that optimises the minimum number of tree removals and proposals that would allow for trees to remain and water to flow around them in an extreme flood? I mean, it's all very well saying that we can landscape and replant, but some of those trees are 40, 50 or more years old, and you can't replace an established tree in a replanting. And one of the biggest concerns with the Banks Ave route was going to be the potential decimation of huge numbers of established trees. I mean, I've wandered right through that catchment, and to my mind, a lot of them could actually stay in the waterway, and an extreme flood can easily flow around them. They don't get anywhere, the current water level doesn't get anywhere near them, but an extreme one may do. But to chop them out because you want to actually physically make a huge great waterway and then land ugly waterway, whereas a naturalised, enhanced, trying to leave as many trees there as possible waterways is something that the Banks Ave residents may buy into. But if you're going to come up with a proposal that actually wants to widen the waterway, rip out 300 trees and replace them with young specimens, which are going to take 30, 40, 50 years to get back to where they are now, is not something that's going to be very palatable at all.
And we recognise that, and you made that very clear at the last meeting, and that's why we're looking at the two options and going to consult on them and come back, and that's been clearly communicated to our consultants, and so those are the options. But we didn't, remember, we didn't have a plan of which trees were coming out, which weren't. We had and so that's some of the detail that we will do at that design stage, and so we can compare apples with apples. Yeah.
Opposed, carried. Thank you very much, guys. Guys, I'm assuming, since we've got about 5 clauses left, that we might just carry on. Yep, good.